The ruined throne room was silent save for the faint crackle of dying embers and the low murmur of shadows that flickered in the corners like restless spirits. Kalen Dravorn stood at the center, eyes fixed on the swirling forms of ash and smoke that coalesced into faint, ghostly shapes around him. They whispered in fragmented voices, voices that carried the weight of centuries, each an echo of a past life bound to the ruin of his once great empire. He reached out a trembling hand, and the swirling shadows responded, weaving around his fingers like smoke caught in a breeze. The power was intoxicating, raw, ancient and alive. It pulsed beneath his skin, promising strength and knowledge beyond any living man's reach. Yet, with every whisper, Kalen felt the creeping chill of doubt settle deeper into his bones. "You seek control," a voice hissed from the shadows, a fragment of a forgotten ancestor speaking in a tongue older than the empire itself. "But power is never given without cost." Kalen's jaw tightened. "I will pay any price to restore what was lost." The spirits swirled faster, their voices overlapping in a dissonant chorus that echoed through the hollow chamber. From the doorway, a sharp voice broke through the spectral cacophony. "Kalen!" Aira Voss stepped forward, her eyes blazing with a fierce mixture of loyalty and concern. Her scarred face was set in a grim line as she approached him cautiously. "You're pushing too hard," she admonished, her voice low but urgent. "The spirits are not tools to be wielded recklessly. You risk losing yourself in their shadows." Kalen turned to face her, his eyes shadowed yet resolute. "And what choice do I have? If I do not harness their power, what hope does this kingdom have?" "Hope lies in balance," Aira replied firmly, "not in surrendering your soul to the ashes." Their words hung heavy in the air as the shadows curled around them, whispering secrets only they could hear. For a moment, even the restless spirits seemed to pause, sensing the fragile tension between mortal will and spectral temptation. Later, as night deepened, Thalen, the whispering shade, emerged from the swirling ash. His form was less solid than before, flickering like a candle flame caught in the wind. His voice was low and sardonic, carrying a weight of ancient knowledge. "You tread a perilous path, Kalen Dravorn," he warned. "The line between salvation and damnation is thinner than you imagine. Each bargain, each summoning binds you tighter to the shadows. What will you sacrifice in the end?" Kalen met Thalen's glowing eyes without flinching. "I will sacrifice whatever it takes." "Beware," Thalen murmured, fading back into the swirling ash. "Some sacrifices are irreversible." The next evening, the fragile peace was shattered during a risky summoning ritual. As Kalen called upon a particularly strong ancestral spirit, the shadows surged violently, threatening to overwhelm him. Panic flared in his chest, but before the darkness could consume him, Lyria stepped forward. Her hands glowed faintly with a soft, calming light as she chanted an ancient incantation. The restless ash gradually stilled, the spirit's rage quelled by her mystic gift. Kalen's breathing slowed, the oppressive weight on his mind lifting. "Thank you," he said quietly, eyes meeting hers with a mix of gratitude and vulnerability. Lyria nodded, her calm presence a rare beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. In the quiet hours that followed, Kalen sat alone among the ruins, the flickering shadows dancing silently around him. His mind churned with the knowledge that the power he sought came with a terrible cost, not just to the kingdom, but to himself. Was he the savior he wished to be, or merely another shadow in the endless night? The crossroads of power had been reached. The path forward was uncertain, and the choices he made in the coming days would shape not only his fate, but that of the empire itself. As dawn's first light crept over the horizon, Kalen rose, resolve hardening in his eyes. The game of shadows had only just begun, and he was determined to master it or be consumed by it. But the question lingered, unspoken yet ever present: how far was he willing to go before losing himself entirely? The throne room, once a symbol of glory, now stood as a testament to his burden, a kingdom dreaming in ashes, and a prince caught between redemption and ruin. The war room was dimly lit by the flickering flame of a single, sputtering torch fastened to the cracked stone wall. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and damp earth, the remnants of recent battles hanging heavy like a shroud over the ruined keep. Erebos sat opposite me, her figure taut and tense, shadows flickering across the sharp planes of her face. Her fiery red hair was cropped close, strands tousled from the day's exertions, and the scars along her forearms caught the light as she rested her hands on the wooden table, scarred by years of use and conflict. For a long moment, silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant cawing of ravens and the occasional creak of the ancient timbers. Then, with a voice steady yet laced with a quiet sorrow, she began to speak not as the fierce warrior I had come to rely on, but as a woman burdened by a past she had long fought to bury. I wasn't always on this side, Eira confessed, her gaze dropping to the scars that marked her flesh like a map of battles past. Before the Empire fell, before I pledged myself to your cause, I wore the colors of those who fought against you. Her words struck me like a cold wind, an admission I had suspected, but never dared confront. The room seemed to close in, the shadows lengthening, as if to listen more closely, the restless spirits whispering secrets I was only beginning to understand. I was a captain then, she continued, voice low, fighting for a faction that sought to preserve its own power, even as the Empire crumbled around us. I was ruthless, driven by a desire to survive, to protect those I cared for, but it was a path stained by blood and betrayal. I leaned forward, the weight of her confession settling over me. What made you change? Eira's eyes met mine, fierce and unyielding. You did. Not you alone, but the memory of what this kingdom was and the hope that it might be again. I saw the ruin, yes, but I also saw the chance for redemption for all of us. Her story unfolded in vivid fragments, memories of battlefields soaked in ash and fire, fleeting moments of mercy amidst cruelty. And a fateful day when she laid down her sword to walk through the ruins towards a cause she once hunted. I saw the weight she bore, the ghosts of comrades lost, the price of betrayal paid in silence and scars. A flash of memory seized me, then the clash of steel in the twilight, the glint of red hair against the smoke-filled sky, and eyes that held both defiance and a depth of pain familiar to my own. We had been enemies once, adversaries on opposite sides of a dying empire, yet fate had woven our paths together with threads of ash and shadow. Back in the present, the ancestral spirits stirred uneasily around us, their whispered voices pressing at the edges of my mind. Their presence was a constant reminder of the legacy we carried, one of power, pain, and the fragile hope that redemption might yet be found in the ashes. I understand if others find it hard to trust me, Eira said quietly, breaking my reverie. But I swear my loyalty to you, to the kingdom we seek to rebuild. I will stand by your side through fire and shadow. I nodded, the weight of her words settling deep within me. Trust was a fragile thread in a world torn by betrayal. But it was one I was willing to grasp, if only to hold on to the hope that we could rise from the ashes together. Outside, the wind howled through the broken battlements, carrying with it the distant echoes of a kingdom's past and the uncertain promise of its future. In that moment of shared silence, a bond was forged, one tempered by pain, strengthened by trust, and bound by the unyielding determination to reclaim what was lost. As the night deepened, I found myself lingering on the edge of hope and despair, caught between the ghosts of yesterday and the fragile dawn we sought to create. Eira's story was not just her own. It was a testament to the complexity of loyalty, the cost of redemption, and the enduring power of trust forged in the crucible of shared struggle. We would face many trials, yet betrayals, battles, and the consuming shadows of our own fears. But for now, in the quiet aftermath of confession and understanding, the kingdom's future seemed, if only just a little less uncertain. And as I watched the flickering torchlight dance across Eira's determined face, I knew that our fragile coalition held within it a spark that might yet ignite the ashes into a new dawn. But the road ahead was long, and the shadows ever watchful. Trust was a beginning, not an end, and the ghosts of our past would not rest until every secret was laid bare. The kingdom dreamed in ashes, and we were its restless hairs bound by blood, guilt, and the unyielding hope of resurrection. Tonight our story continued. The camp was shrouded in a brittle silence, broken only by the whispering wind that sifted through the skeletal remains of what once was a great hall. I knelt upon the cold earth, tracing the faded lines of an ancient summoning circle with trembling fingers, the ash beneath my touch shifting like restless dust. Around me, the night breathed heavily, the weight of unseen eyes pressing down as if the dead themselves leaned closer to watch. Aira stood a few paces away, her scarred hands steady despite the tension that coiled in the air. "Remember, Kaelin," she said softly, her voice a tether to the present. "The spirits are not servants. They are echoes of the past, and they demand respect as much as power." I nodded, swallowing the lump of doubt lodged in my throat. The ritual was forbidden, dangerous beyond measure, and yet it was the only path left. I had to reach into the ashes of my ancestors, to call forth their shadows and bind them to my will. Only then could I hope to restore what was lost. Valen's presence flickered at the edge of my vision, a swirling form of ash and faint light. His eyes, glowing softly like embers, met mine. "The first summoning will test your soul," he murmured, voice like a breeze through dead leaves. "Be prepared to pay the price." I took a deep breath, steadying the storm inside me. The night had deepened. The moon hung low and pale, casting a ghostly glow over the ruins. I began the incantation, the words an ancient tongue that felt both foreign and familiar on my lips. The circle pulsed beneath me, ash rising in delicate spirals, as if awakening from a long slumber. A whisper stirred in the shadows, fragile at first, then growing into a chorus of voices, fragmented and overlapping. They spoke of old battles, forgotten betrayals, and the weight of legacy. My heart hammered in my chest as the air thickened, charged with the energy of the restless dead. Suddenly, a figure coalesced at the center of the circle, an ancestral shadow, both terrifying and majestic. Its form was wreathed in swirling ash, eyes glowing with a cold light that bore into my soul. The presence was overwhelming, a living memory forged from both pride and sorrow. "Kaelin Dravorn," the shadow intoned, voice like distant thunder, "you summon the past, yet do you understand the burden you carry?" I swallowed my fear, meeting its gaze. "I seek to redeem what was lost, to rebuild the kingdom from ashes." The shadow's expression was inscrutable, a mixture of judgment and sympathy. It spoke of the empire's glory and its ruin, of sins buried beneath layers of time. As it spoke, the line between history and present blurred, and I felt the weight of my ancestors' failures settle heavy on my shoulders. But the ritual was not without cost. As the shadow's form solidified, a sudden pain erupted within me, a searing burn that coursed through my veins, draining my strength. I collapsed to my knees, gasping as the world tilted and twisted. Aira was at my side in an instant, her hands steadying me. "Hold on, Kaelin," she urged, her eyes fierce despite the worry etched deep within them. "The power is unstable. You must control it, or it will consume you." Through the haze of agony, I saw the shadow flicker, its form wavering like a candle in a storm. The connection between us was fragile, a tremulous thread binding past and present. Lyria stepped forward then, her calm presence a balm amid chaos. She murmured a soothing chant, her hands glowing faintly as she reached toward the circle, calming the restless spirits and easing the strain on my body. Slowly, the pain ebbed, leaving me weak but alive. The shadow regarded me once more before fading back into the ashes, its final words lingering in the cold air. "Power demands sacrifice. Remember this, or be lost to the shadows forever." As silence reclaimed the night, I remained kneeling, breath ragged and thoughts racing. The first step toward resurrection was taken, but the cost was clear. This path was perilous, as much a trial of will as of strength. In the quiet that followed, I found no answers, only the haunting echo of that warning. Could I truly wield such volatile power without losing myself? The kingdom's fate and my own hung precariously in the balance. Yet, despite the fear and pain, a flicker of hope stirred within me. The shadows were no longer just ashes in the dark. They were allies, legacies, and perhaps the keys to redemption. But only if I could master the cost. The night deepened, wrapping the ruins in its cold embrace, and as I rose unsteadily to my feet, I knew the journey had only just begun. We moved forward. I whispered into the dark, the weight of the past heavy but no longer paralyzing, for the kingdom, for the future. The ashes stirred once more, alive with restless whispers as if answering my vow, and the shadows waited. The war room was suffused with a restless energy, the flickering fire casting long shadows that danced across the cracked stone walls. Prince Kalen Dravorn stood rigid by the map table, his gaze sharp yet wary, as Ira Voss paced opposite him, her red hair catching the low light like a flame. The air between them was taut with unspoken grievances and the heavy weight of looming decisions. Kalen, Ira began, her voice steady but edged with frustration. We cannot keep pushing the limits of the ancestral magic without considering the cost. Every summoning tears at the veil between worlds, and our people grow restless, afraid, uncertain. Kalen clenched his jaw, the familiar ache of guilt rising anew. I know the risks, Ira, but without this power we have no hope of reclaiming what was lost. The Empire's ashes will remain just that, ashes. She stopped pacing, her eyes meeting his with unyielding resolve. Hope built on shadows is fragile, Kalen, and shadows can consume more than just light. A silence fell between them, thick and heavy. The prince's mind spun with doubts. Had his desperate grasp for power blinded him to the fractures it sowed among his allies? The whispered warnings of the ancestral spirits, the restless unease in his companions, all converged into a chorus of caution he could no longer ignore. Elsewhere in the keep, Lyria knelt beside a flickering shadow that wreathed like smoke caught in a sudden breeze. Her hands glowed faintly with a soft, soothing light, fingers tracing gentle patterns in the air as she murmured words in the old tongue. The spectral figure's restless agony eased, if only for a moment, and a fragile calm settled in the chamber. Despite her efforts, the healer's brow was furrowed with worry. The spirits grew more volatile with each summoning, their whispers more anguished, their presence heavier. Lyria knew that her gift was a temporary salve on a wound that threatened to fester uncontrollably. In the throne room, an unnatural chill filled the air as Thylan, the whispering shade, materialized from a swirl of ash and embers. His faintly glowing eyes scanned the gathered council, and his voice, low and cryptic, wove through the chamber like a shadowed breeze. Power such as this demands a price, he intoned, his tone sardonic yet laced with truth. And not all debts are paid in coin or blood. Some are settled in the shattering of trust, the fracturing of hope. Murmurs rippled among the allies. Doubt crept into their eyes. Suspicion hung thick as the ash that clung to the stone floors. Kalen's heart sank as he watched the fragile unity begin to crack under the strain of fear and uncertainty. That night, beneath a sky starless and heavy with clouds, Kalen found himself alone on the ramparts. The distant howls of restless spirits echoed faintly across the ruins. He traced the scars that marred his hands, remnants of battles fought both within and without. The rifts within his group mirrored the desolation of the Empire itself. Allies questioned his judgment. Whispers of dissent threatened to unravel the precarious alliance he had forged. And yet, despite the weight pressing upon him, he refused to yield. If the kingdom is to rise again, he whispered to the empty night, it will be because I bear the burden no one else can. His reflection in the still waters below was fragmented, a mosaic of shadows and light much like the path ahead. In the days that followed, Kalen called his council together, determined to confront their fears and doubts openly. The conversations were raw and often painful, voices raised and emotions laid bare. He listened as Ira cautioned restraint, as Lyria pleaded for mercy toward the spirits, and as Thalan's veiled warnings echoed in their minds. The prince wrestled with his own inner turmoil, balancing the desperate need for power against the moral cost it exacted. Each decision weighed heavily, threatening to tip the fragile balance they had fought so hard to maintain. Yet, amid the tension, moments of unexpected solidarity emerged. Allies shared stories of loss and hope, of fears overcome and trust earned. Kaelan saw flickers of the unity he longed for, fragile yet enduring. But the shadows were never far behind. The ancestral spirits stirred restlessly, their whispers growing louder with each passing night. The threat of Lady Morn's cult loomed ever closer, an ominous reminder that their struggle was far from over. As the chapter closed, Kaelan stood once again overlooking the ruins, the weight of his choices pressing down like the cold night air. The rifts within his group remained, but so too did a flicker of determination, a haunted resolve to face the darkness within and without. For the sake of a kingdom still dreaming in ashes. "We cannot afford to fall apart now," he vowed quietly, "not when the fate of everything rests on what we do next." The wind carried his words into the night, a silent promise amid the restless shadows. The chamber beneath the shattered keep was cloaked in a suffocating silence, broken only by the faint crackle of restless ashes drifting in the stale air. I stood at the heart of the ruins, the weight of the night pressing down upon me with all the force of 1,000 whispered regrets. Before me, the swirling mass of ash began to coalesce, dark shadows twisting and twining until the form of Thalan, the whispering shade, emerged. His eyes, faintly glowing embers, bore into mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "You seek the truth, Kaelan," he said, his voice a rasp that seemed to echo from beyond the veil. "But are you prepared to bear the burden it carries?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight as I nodded. There was no turning back now. For years, I had carried the weight of the Empire's fall upon my shoulders, blaming myself for every death, every betrayal, every ruin. Yet tonight, I would confront the shadows of my past more directly than ever before. Thalen moved closer, the ash swirling around him like a living storm. "Your guilt, Prince, is not without foundation," he murmured, "but it is incomplete. There are truths hidden even from you, buried beneath centuries of silence and deceit." Images flickered in the air, ghostly scenes painted in ash and memory. I watched, helpless, as figures emerged from the mist of the past, a grand council chamber, voices raised in heated argument, a blade drawn in secret. Then the face of a man, bearing the same sharp features as my own, twisted in betrayal as he struck at the heart of the Empire. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. This was no mere enemy. It was blood and ancestor whose treachery had set in motion the chain of events that culminated in our downfall. It was not only the armies without that destroyed us, Thalen intoned, but the venom within. Your lineage carries the stain of this betrayal. I staggered back, my breath ragged. The room spun with the weight of this knowledge. All I had believed about my failures, my responsibility, now unraveled and wove itself into a new, more complex tapestry. Could I have been fighting shadows of my own blood all along? Aira's footsteps echoed softly behind me, and I turned to see her standing in the doorway. Her red hair caught the faint light, her eyes sharp but softened with concern. "Kaelan," she said quietly, "this changes nothing. The blood you bear is not your sin to carry alone. It is your choice what legacy you leave." Her words steadied me, even as the storm raged within. I looked back to Thalen, who awaited my response with that inscrutable expression. "If this is the truth," I said, voice steady despite the turmoil, "then I will not run from it. I will confront the darkness in my blood, and I will forge a new path for this kingdom, one that is not bound by the sins of the past." Thalen inclined his head slightly, the ash around him swirling in approval. "Then prepare yourself, Kaelan Dravorn. The road ahead will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine." As the shade faded into the night, the ashes settling once more into silence, I felt the weight of my ancestors' shadows press down, but this time it was not crushing. It was a challenge, a call to rise beyond the ruin and reclaim what had been lost, and I would answer it, no matter the cost. The wind whispered through the broken stones, carrying with it the faintest trace of hope. The kingdom dreamed still, in ashes and shadows, and so would I. But as I stepped from the chamber, the question lingered in my mind like a restless spirit. If the darkness lay within me, could I truly redeem this empire? Or was I destined to become the very shadow I sought to banish?